All right, everybody, we're trying a new segment here. Good news of the week. This might be the best news of the year. We're joined by Clayton Murphy. For most of you guys, he needs no introduction. Clayton was the 2016 Olympic bronze medalist at 800 meters. Since then, every year up until this year, he ran 143 or faster, a 5-time USA champion, 2-time Olympic trials champion, one of the most consistent guys on the circuit. But now Clayton, he's a dad. I think that's what he's most proud of right now. His little son Cash, if you guys missed this story, it's amazing. Clayton posted on Instagram, Cash, noun, meaning brave, mighty, courageous, incredible, perfect, a miracle. And it's totally true. Clayton's wife, Ariana, she had Cash 27 weeks into her pregnancy. For those of you who can do math, that's 12 or 13 weeks early. And Cash is doing amazingly well now. After 65 days in the ICU, he went home this past week. Clayton posted on Instagram, this doesn't make you tear up, something wrong with you. Cash is the most incredible human. We can't believe he's ours. He's defied all the odds, never acted like a 27-weeker, and proved to everyone that he would grow up to be just fine. We could go on and on. We'll continue to share our NICU journey and keeping sharing Cash and his milestones for years to come. We thank God every single day for our Bubba. It's like he was supposed to arrive on October 2nd all along. Clayton, congratulations to you, Ariana, and Cash, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks. I almost teared up, but you were reading that, and I was just hearing it, and I'm part of writing it.
I'm some stranger on the internet, and the first time I read it, I was like, oh my God. And then even today, like preparing this, I was like, oh my God. It's just so touching. I mean, I'm a dad now. My wife's pregnant again, but I think anyone can relate to just it's a great story, and also the love. Kids teach us love. Like until you have a kid, I think you don't know how much you can love somebody. And I hope you're enjoying it. Are you getting a little sleep now?
Getting a little sleep. We're trading off. We're trying to trade off without counting each other's sleep hours, but there's for sure that like you're tracking what the other person's sleeping in the back of your head and using that in the back pocket. I'm sure all newborn parents have went through that first couple week phase. There's for sure better nights than others. There's for sure longer days than others, but honestly, 65 days in the NICU, we never missed a day going back and forth. We were about 30 minutes from the NICU. We never missed a day. We were there every day. And so to not have to drive 30 minutes to hold him and feed him and hang out with him, I would trade no sleep all day for that.
Well, I think Cash is definitely a sprinter like his mom. Came out, wanted to get out there so early. But I mean, talking to you before this, it sounds like, first of all, he's doing great, right? Like,
yeah, that not a 27 weeker is something that the doctors use since day one. And they were like, when they do rounds, they say like, don't talk too loud. We don't want him to know how old he is. Like we wanted him to think he's older than what he is. And he's smiling. He's literally engaging with you already. He cries for bottles. He takes bottles. He is like, you wouldn't think that he was born at 27 weeks. You would just think he's a super tiny newborn at this point.
That's great. You were saying, I was asking a little bit about the pregnancy. Like, did you guys know he was coming early or anything? And I guess you can tell that story a little bit if you want, but the answer is no.
Yeah, we had no idea. So whatever the math is on that, whenever she was started pregnancy, which was towards like in the beginning of outdoor season, through the day he was born was, for lack of better terms, hell for her. I mean, she was 24/7 morning sickness, 24/7 sickness. I mean, like we talked about at USA, she pretty much would be bedridden. She'd drag herself out of the bed to watch me race at the meet, and then she would drag herself back to the Airbnb and sit with a trash can next to the bed. And so there was a lot of stress put on her. I mean, she lost almost 30 pounds. I mean, there's a lot of 2 or 3 ER visits. I mean, it was horrible for her to deal with, and it was tough a lot of times. I mean, when I was in Europe, I mean, all I worried about was obviously her health, being there and thinking about that. And we went in on October 1st thinking that she just was having some contractions, small contractions or false contractions or cramps. and ended up being dilated. And we went in about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon thinking, yeah, we'll be out here by tomorrow. Then it became, well, he'll come at least in a couple weeks. And then it became, he came at midnight that night. So what we thought was kind of a normal Saturday with some normal contractions became the day he was born. So it kind of flipped upside down pretty quickly.
I can't imagine. I don't think a lot of us can, because first kid, you have no clue what's going on. But
No clue.
3 months beforehand, like,
Yeah.
you guys didn't have like the kid's room planned out, or a crib or anything like that, right?
I think the only thing we had was we bought a blanket off Etsy that had his name on it. And that was like one of the only things we had. Oh, we had a stroller because it was on sale at Nordstrom on the semi-annual sale. That's like the only reason we had it. We were like waiting. Like the rocking chair that every parent has, like that showed up like 3 or 4 days after he was home. Like we just didn't, yeah. It was for sure surprise. For sure.
Yeah, his actual due date, I think you said, was December 29th, which is 2 weeks from today. So
Yeah.
after 65 days in the hospital, he still shouldn't even be here yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for sure weird because we were just sitting in his nursery hanging out with him when I got back from doing stuff today. We looked at it and we're like, can you believe he's like here? Like we're like, he's still not supposed to be here. So I think until we pass that due date, we'll still wake up every day and be like, I can't believe he's like here and not like hanging out inside of you still.
Yeah, I mean, kids are true miracles, but Cash even more so. How was that first drive home from the hospital? That was like a. I was just so nervous driving with a kid in the back. I don't know
You
why.
drive like this, like 10 on 2, and I had like white knuckles. I was like the light, I had to make sure the light was completely green. I like checked both ways. Oh, we've only left the house once with him to go to one pediatric appointment just because of everything going on with RSV and everything. We've been very careful about like him. Everything comes to the house pretty much treatment wise for him. And the one time even I went there, it's literally like 3 miles down the road. And I think I drove the slowest I've ever drove 3 miles in my life. Like I just every single bump, I'm like, hey, there's a bump coming up. Make sure he's okay. And I'd like hit it so slowly to go over like everything. Yep. Sure, I'll drive like that for a while.
Okay, I'm glad it just wasn't me. I mean, you're an Olympic medalist and good under pressure. I thought maybe I was just cracking under the pressure, but
No, I
it's
mean, for the
universal.
first 3 days he was home, he was like, you were just like carrying him like with every single thing. I'd lay him in the bassinet. I'd be so scared. Now that I know he's like, good, I'm like dancing around with him in the room now and like tickling him. Like he started to like, you kind of started to like become more confident with him. But at first, I mean, we held him. So like the first time we could hold him was when he was like still under 2 pounds. I mean, well under 2 pounds still was the first time we held him. And he's connected to IVs. He was connected to his feeding tube and connected to his breathing oxygen. And they had to like take him out of the incubator and wheel all of that stuff over next to you in the chair and then lay him on you. And he like couldn't move because if he moved, his like IV would come out or his NG tube would come out or his like CPAP would come out. So you had to like hold him still. And we could only hold him twice a day. And but you could hold him as long as you would pretty much last in the chair. You could hold him till as long as he was doing well and you were doing well, you could just keep holding him. And there was one day Ari held him for like 5 hours straight and just wouldn't give up. And like everybody knew us in the hospital because every time we were in there, we would just hold him. Up until the day he left, we would like never have him in thing. We just wanted to hold him and like know that he was like loved in there. And still, I think we kind of maybe ruined it a little bit because now he just likes to be held. But I'll hold him all day if that's what it takes to get him to go to sleep.
Yeah, you didn't ruin him. You're
No,
being a dad. Good parents, good parents.
yeah.
It sounds like Ari's got some good endurance if she could hold him for 5 hours.
She almost walked back in there with adult diapers because then she's like, I think if I have that, then I can hold him for a few extra hours. And I'm like, babe, you really don't need to do that. Like, you're good. Like, we're okay. We'll be able to hold him as long as you want very soon. And she's like, okay, you're right. You're right. But there was 2 or 3 times I think she was about to stop at CVS and get adult diapers on our way to the NICU to hang out with him just that much longer.
Wow. Um, I mean, it sounds like he's got two, like, I was thinking about the genes. Like, obviously, to be an NCAA champion, Olympic medalist, you got to have like some good genetic talent. But I was overlooking like the determination part. Both of you guys sound like super competitive, super determined. I mean, that's part of what makes you guys champions. So I think Cash is going to be great. I guess I don't want to project too far out. I mean, maybe he'll be into football or music, who knows? But assuming he goes track and field, I mean, is he going to be a sprinter mid distance?
Yeah, it's still up for debates. I mean, if agents and shoe companies want to start sending letters, we're for sure accepting those now. Doyle Management's already sent their letter of ask to represent a representation of him. So I mean, if other agencies want to send their offers to represent him, I mean, we're accepting those now. He's 65 days, 60, whatever he is, 70 days old. We can make up some sort of futuristic deal. I'm sure.
I'm not sure what the rules are on NIL. I think you have to wait for the due date. The due date. I think it
The
has
due
to be
date.
December 29th. They haven't really thought about this
Yeah.
one yet.
I mean, I've already planted the seed with Nike and been like, hey guys, like, you want to get on him early. You can get him before he even gets home. You can get him when he's in the hospital still.
Yeah, hopefully not. Nike. I don't know if you're kind of a free agent, right? Like just in terms of like athletes but they had the whole big thing with maternity leave. You need to push for like paternity leave. That's the next thing.
Something.
Um, all right, you want to talk a little running as well?
Let's do it. Let's talk about running. That's what it's built around, right? That's why it's a cool
Yeah,
story too.
yeah. I assume you guys. Your wife's in the running, family as well. Like, from what I've seen, everything on social media has just been amazing. The outpouring of support, has that been helpful?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the pregnancy was awful too. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. I mean, it was really hard for both of us. Obviously, her more than me. She was going through the sickness, but to leave her and try to compete. I mean, I was talking with Doyle about this, my agent, the other day, about how many potential meets I don't want to say I skipped, but I didn't run at, or I didn't necessarily prepare the right way for, because he said I spent more time on the phone with him this year changing flights around because of her than anything he's ever had with injury or anything. And that's just because I wanted to be there for her and help her, and I was worried about her. So honestly, other than those sleep thing, this is like a cakewalk for me as far as worrying, because I know that he's all right and his mother is there for him every step of the way. I just don't like to leave the house now to work out because I don't want to leave my time with him. That's the hardest part. Every time I'm working out, I'm thinking about, man, I can't wait to get back home to hang out with him. So the sleep factor is for sure there, but it kind of, again, if you want to talk about a blessing, he kind of came at the right time, where he came in between seasons, where I got time to kind of adapt to being a dad, adapt to having a newborn, and make those actual logistics adjustments and scheduling and practices to still be able to compete at a high level, even with a little kiddo hanging out in the house.
I wasn't going to start with your season last year, but I kind of alluded this in the intro. 2016, you ran 142.9 at the Olympics. Pretty good time to run a PB. That left you as the Olympic bronze medalist. Next year, 143.6. You're trying a historic double at USA's. Didn't quite work out, but hey, I loved it. You gotta aim big. 2018, you were then part of the NOP, 143.12. And I think, was that PB again at USA's?
Uh,
Maybe not.
no, I haven't PB'd since 16.
Not PB, but season's best. You have a habit of running very well at USA's.
I think it was that was in London in the Diamond League, I think, when I ran that in 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
2019, 143 again, 143.9. Made the final at Worlds. 2020, COVID. Nobody counts that. 2021, I think if the Olympics had been a little bit earlier, you'd be the Olympic champion right now. I don't know if that makes you feel good or bad, but 143.17 to win the trials. And so this last year, you only ran 145.2, but that was your best time of the year, and you still did it at USA's.
Yeah, it was for sure a weird, like I said, a weird year. I mean, Puerto Rico was my opening meet. And I remember we went there to have a vacation. That's part of the reason we chose the Puerto Rico meet, was we were going to kind of kick off our season with a little weekend away, knowing that we had a kiddo at the end of the season, that we might not have that opportunity post year to do kind of a getaway together. And we went there, and we actually flew home the morning after the meet instead of staying for a week because of her sickness. And then everything was kind of built around that, and trying to get her as healthy as possible. So my head was for sure distracted. For sure was doing everything I could to train. I mean, there was some obviously normal injury stuff that I dealt with this year, but I for sure was not in like the most proper headspace most of the year. But I felt like I was in shape and fit enough to learn well at trials, and that was going to be where I was ready to go in Eugene. And then mentioned to you in the pre-talk there that I got food poisoning literally the last meal before I got on the plane at home, and pretty much had it up until about the pre-race day before the prelims. So for sure was not aptly nutritionally prepared for that weekend, and did whatever I could. Tactically didn't execute the final, but in a US final, if you're not either tactically on or physically on, doesn't matter how good you are, you leave a room for that not to be successful. That's what I did. So
Yeah, how hard was that? I mean, you've had so much success with the Worlds in Eugene this year, and to not make the team, like, was that a new phase of running for you to sort of deal with disappointment like that, or do you consider getting eighth at Worlds disappointing? I mean, I don't know how you evaluated it, but I would personally be like, oh, I made the final, but was this a new level of disappointment for you?
I think the Tokyo final was really close to this disappointment. The Doha final was different. That was the day everything went down with that morning of was, and everything went down with the Oregon project. My headspace was, I would love that race back, but I was always behind the eight ball when that race started, mentally. But then Tokyo was just execution. I mean, really, that's why I was so frustrated with that. I just didn't execute what I wanted to do. And then the final at the USA's was very similar. Execution, physically just didn't have the snap to kind of make up for those mistakes I made. So I for sure went into some hard self-reflection after those two races. I remember like we went back to the Airbnb after, and like no one would talk to me in the Airbnb, and finally like Ari spoke up and she's like, we're ordering pizza. And I'm like, great, we're ordering pizza. And I just ate pizza, drank beer, and like sat in the hot tub that night after the final, and just kind of like, I remember we went like full board. Like one of my buddies, who's like my assistant coach on the, like we were talking hot tub, and I went full board into like, I could have done this, 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 I could have done this. And he's like, looks at me after 20 minutes, he's like, you done? Like, move on. Like, you can't change anything now. And I'm like, all right, you're right. And I mean, a couple weeks after, I for sure was, it was tough. It was tough to watch Worlds. I didn't watch Worlds the first day. Like, I turned it on and I walked out of the room, and my wife watched it with a couple of other people, and I went upstairs and did other stuff. And then the second day I said, I'm over it. I got my jeer at Worlds. Like, I'm not going to watch it. I'm not there. It's not cool anymore. I got that out of my system, and I watched it and enjoyed every minute of it and cheered for everybody there. Guys who I, look up to and still and run with, and wanted to see them succeed, and then try to go over to Europe and at least pick up the pieces from the season, and come home and now get to be a dad. So it didn't end up being a bad year after all.
Yeah, you're being a dad, gives
Trumps all of
perspective,
that,
right?
Trumps all of that, yeah.
And also, like, well, you made a lot of teams, so you're going to know some of the sprinters, but having Ari have been a sprinter your life, I feel like track and field, there's such, like, everybody has their own event. Like, distance runners I know way more about distance running. I know a little bit about sprinting. I know almost nothing about field events. But having a wife, who was like a world-class sprinter, does that sort of expose you to, like, I mean, every event you probably really know what's going on. Are you more aware? Is it funner for you to watch track meets than the rest of us?
I for sure am like a track. Like, I enjoy track. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy every event. Like, I mean, you were talked about, like, Devin and I did that podcast for a while where we were breaking everything down. Like, that was so fun for me to like go through results and like really be in it. I wasn't as like deep into it this year as what I usually am, as far as like other events and debating this and debating that. And then obviously Ari is the same way. Like, Ari is invested in track and field all the way through. So we just had debates about Randolph Ross and the Bowerman and that whole thing 10 minutes ago before we got on this call. It was literally like we sat at the table and we had a full on 10-minute discussion about, I mean, that's like a normal night in our house. And I'm friends with every event across the board. I mean, whether it's through dual management and the agency and guys I've traveled with to meets and sat on trains across Europe with, or whether it's just friendships I made from college through teams, like for sure have a branch out into almost every event group. I have somebody who I'd consider probably a friend in almost every event. And that's fun for me because it allows me to enjoy and watch every event and almost have somebody to cheer for and have fun through in every event in track and field.
Well, I should probably have Ari on the podcast. But yeah, one question, because I should know more about this. I don't know much about the sprinting, but like, I mean, she was an NCAA champion, 100 and 200, right, as a freshman. Is that right?
Yeah, first freshman to and then collegiate record holder indoor 200 at the time. 2017, she ran on the world prelim 4x1 team. Should have ran on the final. Should have ran in 2016 relays. Should have ran on the final there. Her and the Oregon girls should have all ran.
Because there was some debate then, of her going pro. She stayed in school.
Yeah,
but then she never really pursued the pro career. Like what was the rationale there? What was the thinking? I mean, because she sounds like a track sort of lifer.
There was a lot of outside pressures that affected her and her mindset and her ability to enjoy the sport, I'd say. I mean, since she picked up track in high school, she's been a prodigy. I mean, I think she's the second most decorated high school athlete in track and field in California. I mean, she's like the real deal when it goes. I mean, she went to Long Beach Poly. She prodigy and she talked about all the recruiting trips. And she's like, I went to Miami and Florida State and I was on a helicopter here and did this here. I was like, I literally drove to like Miami of Ohio. It was like 30 minutes down the road and had lunch with the coach who was like 75 and like enjoyed lunch, and that we drove back home. Like that was my recruiting trips. Like my recruiting trips were completely different than hers. And so there was a lot of factors that kind of led into it. And then ultimately she made a decision of what made her happy. And I think she will tell you she'll make the decision 10 times again. But she still loves the sport. She's addicted to the sport. She loves being a fan of the sport. I mean, we'll go through meets and we'll just like, the roster app, we're like big into it. They compete against each other and picking people and picking teams and debating this and debating that. I mean, it's for sure, it's kind of a lot of fun because not many couples can have a full on track conversation at the dinner table and really dive into something.
Yeah. I mean, my wife's like, you really like watching these people run around in short shorts? And I'm like, that's not how I would put it, but yeah. But she knows I love it. Okay, I'm rewinding things here. 2021 Olympic final. Like tactically, what do you like? You're saying you felt like you really messed up. Like, what do you mean by that?
I made a mistake at 200 meters where I was in a good position and I allowed a guy on the inside and a guy on the outside to squeeze me back. And instead of fighting for that position and putting forth the effort to fight to go towards the front of the race, I let everybody go and kind of settled into the back. And then by the time I got wound up to go and got my legs going, everybody was going in front of me. And at that point, you can't gap. At that point, the 8 other best guys in the world on that day, you can't give them any kind of head start, no matter how good you are. So by the time that I got going, it was almost too late. And then you just kind of pick up the scraps and mentally you're defeated by the fact you get to 100 meters and you're sprinting all out and they're gone. And you're just like, you can't do anything about it. So I think I pretty much lost the race at 200 meters. Because as you know, in the 800, hand fighting, arm fighting, fighting for position is not necessarily the greatest thing ever to do. But in a tactical slow race like that, you have to do it. And I just made the wrong decision there. And I think that one decision cost me any opportunity to any sort of medal, let alone win it.
Looking back, how well you ran at the trials and even just how consistent you've been. I mean, Emmanuel Career's a good runner, but you're as good as he is.
Yeah, I for sure walked away from that race. Like I said, it was one of the toughest immediate defeats of my sports life, I'd say, that I can remember.
Yeah, pretty crazy. And then 2019, I completely forgot about that. The day of the final, like Alberto was banned from the sport that morning. Is that correct? Is that the?
I got a text from Ari at like 5 a.m. Doha time that said, "Don't check your phone." Obviously, I'm gonna check my phone. Yeah, and I see it, and so at 5 a.m. I'm not going back to sleep. I was roommates with Bryce at the time, and so I didn't want to be in a room with Bryce going into the final. I didn't want to really be in contact with anybody from USA track and field at that time. I mean, there was a lot of, I remember I went down the elevator to get breakfast and everybody just staring at me. I mean, my coach was just banned. It's not necessarily the greatest look as an athlete. So I moved into the Nike hotel, into a room there, and pretty much isolated myself. My phone, deleted social media, and kind of tried to lock myself in. I remember even warming up, I went over and said, this is the best I felt all weekend, like physically. But then mentally, I just didn't have it. I was so drained. I got halfway through the race and mentally slipped, and it just became like an uphill battle. And it all hit me after the race. I for sure had a breakdown in the tunnel before I went through the mix zone. There was a stopping point where I got stopped to make sure that I was prepared to go through the media and handle the media. And I hit a wall and sat there for about 5 minutes and never moved. I was almost paralyzed, realizing that like I was almost a very similar situation to 2021. I thought I could compete to win. I really truly did. And then you obviously factor in that I just picked up my life and moved from Ohio to Portland, and now I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do. I have no idea how I'm going to train, where I'm going to train, who I'm going to train with, and it all hit me at that moment when everything slowed down from that day and the adrenaline was gone. So for sure was carrying that into that 2 laps around the track.
So did you come through and talk to the media?
Yeah, I did.
Try to pull up the video or something.
Yeah, I did. I feel like I've watched the video again. I feel like I handled it really well, and I was very honest about it. There was no there was obviously a slight bit of preparedness from my agent from USATF, but a lot of it was truly like how I felt, true honesty. I prepared I was ready for it. I knew what I wanted to say, how I wanted to handle it. I don't think I took many questions. Obviously, it wouldn't have really went that far with it, but I did what I could to, put myself out there, to be fair to you guys as media people, to not just walk through. I've had some times where I've walked through, obviously younger in my career, but as I get older and older and older, I try to understand you guys have a job to do and try to give you as much as I fairly can, I guess. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it totally does, and I really appreciate it. It's funny because I didn't know we were going to go here at all during this podcast. I sort of vaguely remember it, but I tell everyone. Like we were saying on the main portion of the podcast we recorded earlier, Max Siegel came up. We can get to him in a minute, but I was like, Max should tell his story because the story he tells will be better than one we make up for him. Like everyone has a story, they have their point of view, and like if you don't telling it, I don't think it really ever hurts you.
My only thing about it is like, is my defensive athletes that is the, I mean, you're an athlete, you ran, you you've dealt with it, you've been in the sport. It's such a high stress situation of track and field that however long your event is, that lead up of that day, the months and months that you put into that one opportunity, that one gunshot, and to compete in the length of the event that you're in. And then if it doesn't go to what you think you're capable of, or you don't achieve what you thought you could, trying to then bring yourself back together to then answer you guys when you're not doing anything wrong by asking us questions, you're doing your job, but to try to get yourself gathered to accurately answer the questions without that pure emotional letdown is one of the toughest things for sure as an athlete to have to deal with, for sure. It's not easy.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but track is so unique, right? Like you spend all season, all year, pretty much training for like anywhere from like 10 seconds, in your wife's case, to like under 2 minutes for you. 10K runners under 28 minutes. It's like it's not that much time. Whereas even a soccer game, a basketball game, you're out there for a couple of hours. You have more time to sort of even process the game. You kind of realize you're losing, maybe even. I mean, it's so unique.
And it's also different. I mean, if you want to look at it as like our Olympics or our USA's for some people, is like their NBA finals, their NFL Super Bowl, their playoffs. So if you fall short of that, let's say you get knocked out in the playoffs, like it's just a little bit different feeling than you get all the way to the very, very end, and you like, it's almost like getting beat on a buzzer beater every time you run. It's pretty much how it is. Cause exactly what you said. It's not like you're very rarely in the race are you processing the fact that like, wow, this isn't going to plan. Like if you're like, I'm trying to be top 3 and you're third, you're like, you're going through the mix zone pretty happy still. But if you're going in to win the race and you aren't really giving up on it until you cross the line. There's not much time to really process the fact you didn't achieve everything you put into it prior to it, until you're asked about it and you're vulnerable.
Yeah, in some ways, like losing the Super Bowl is like worse than losing, like not making the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? But
Hmm.
there you are in the finals of the Worlds or the Olympics, and it didn't quite go to form. Um, yeah, with the NOP thing, like I'm trying to think. Like you didn't know much beforehand, right? Like, did you know anything like that? There was a chance he would get banned. Like, if you talked to Alberto since then, were you pissed? Like, I mean, now it's been what, 3 years? Like, what are your thoughts on it? Sort of 3 years later.
I don't really have any like new thoughts about it. I haven't had any direct communication with Alberto. It was something that Nike and everybody put up a boundary amongst, even though there's technically you could have communication non-track related. Um, I have been told that he's like still supportive and prays about my family, and like we had a really good relationship when we were both athletes. So you can't necessarily take away that piece of it. Um, but I wasn't told. I was told enough to know that there was an investigation. I was told. Um, I think I was blindsided as much as what Nike was, as much as it and Alberto was, especially for it to be released when it was. There was supposed to be, I was told there was supposed to be a release of a verdict, um, but it wasn't supposed to be anywhere around World Championships. It was supposed to be following World Championships, and that they were confident in the verdict that would be released. So there was for sure that's why I think it was so hard on that day. It was completely blindsided. Not something that I had prepared for. It's not like I was told 5 days before, like, hey, it's going to be released on your final. Like, be prepared, even if it doesn't go the way we're expecting. So, um, but I felt confident in what the team was. Obviously, um, I worked really, really hard with Labady and Akron to get where I was, and wasn't going to step into a situation that put anything like that at risk. I have nothing but me personally great things to say about Alberto and the Oregon Project and my experiences there. I mean, um, it was, yeah, nothing. There's nothing that I could look back on and be like, maybe, or that makes sense. It was, I mean, you bust your ass under Alberto and you ran as hard as you could every day in practice, and the results were there. That was literally what it was built on. So nothing's really changed in that respect. It's just kind of, it was, the timing of it was unfortunate, and obviously the point of my career was kind of unfortunate to make such a drastic change from Coach Labadian in a college system to a very high level professional system, now back to a different training philosophy. There was for sure a like big adjustment period between the three.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then the Alberto thing, even like afterwards, the whole safe sport stuff, like even for me in the sport, because Alberto, obviously there'd been the BBC stuff, and there was like some, I don't know what the word is, smoke around the program, or just, some stuff, and like you're probably aware of that, but the safe sport stuff, or even for me, came completely out of nowhere. Like, I was so
Yeah, I
shocked when I heard
didn't.
that.
Yeah, I didn't know it. A lot of that stuff happened obviously well before I was even considering joining or even had talks about joining. Most of that happened. Some of it happened somewhat soon, but I never felt different about it. I never felt that there was any sort of unsafe environment as an athlete. Obviously, not being female, obviously might have a different, approach about it. Older Alberto, I know for a fact that there were some differences in Alberto's intensity when I was there versus prior years. I know he was a lot more intense earlier years versus when I was there, but a lot of that I was very taken back on and could not believe it. And a lot of it was also taken out of context, knowing Alberto as a person, like one of the funniest dudes I've ever met. And a lot of that I think was taken well out of context. I will say that. He's one of the funniest guys I've ever known as a coach.
Yeah, well, I think there was like, well, there's two angles, right? There was some of the stuff that was more public, like in the New York Times, like fat shaming and treatment of Mary Kane. But then, I mean, ultimately he was banned, right, for alleged, or I mean, the safe sport convicted him, sexual assault, right? I mean, like, that's completely different. Like, that stuff, I'm sure you'd never, or had you heard anything, like
No,
anything
yeah,
like
no,
that?
no, nothing like that. Yeah, I never would have thought that could even be possible when I was there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sad or unfortunate or terrible. I don't know what the right word is. I
Yeah.
Well, let's turn to more positive news because you're talking about coaching and Coach LeBady, your coach at Akron. It was announced today Akron is bringing back men's cross country.
Yeah, so it's a big step in the right direction. There's a completely new staff in place now with the program. So I think it's a huge direction to kind of crawl program back to where it was just, you know, 3 or 4 years ago. Put multiple people in the NCAA championships fighting for MAC titles every time they step on the track and can be putting out, Olympians and world championship qualifiers on a pretty somewhat regular basis. There was at least, a trickle of them through. So I think it's for sure huge steps in the right direction to kind of get that back.
And you were saying before we got started, today was your first day on campus since when?
The last time I was on campus was the MAC championship before the COVID outbreak. So whatever that March, whenever the MAC championship was before, I was training in Akron, doing a training stint. So at the MAC championship, watching it. Then days later was when the NBA shut down and the world went to the apocalyptic state. And then soon after that's when everything was cut, when I was still in Portland, right before I moved back. And I moved back right after it got cut. So I never had any reason to go back on campus. And so I've lived within 30 minutes of campus and made no trips back to campus since then. So today was the first time.
So you're sort of protesting the program or the treatment of. Is that a fair assessment?
I for sure. I mean, I made a post, a blog post, Instagram post where I blacked out Akron on my jersey after I won the NCAA title. I for sure directly wrote emails to say that I don't support them using my image and likeness and trying to promote things with my gain or their gain from me if they weren't going to support a program that really had no legitimate reason to be cut. I think that was the biggest thing. I everybody understood you needed in COVID to make financial choices, but to cut a program like we talked about that was $10K operating budget, $15K operating budget, and makes the school money with walk-ons and Ohio aid, and you can't win without it. There's all those reasons, and they didn't care. It was very frustrating to see one of the strongest athletic programs in Akron, if not the strongest, most successful, kind of just be chopped up and thrown to the side and been like, you don't need it.
Thank you for standing up for, long distance runners. Did you know the program was coming back? I mean, that this was in the works?
Yeah, I knew there was a new AD come in. That new AD was very adamant. It was on his agenda to bring back cross country. He was very shocked it ever got cut in the first place. Now, I didn't believe that he actually followed through with it, let alone followed through with it as quick as he has. And I knew it would be kind of tough because, like I said, they just hired a whole new staff from top to bottom. So I didn't know where that stood with bringing back cross country. But I was heard through the grapevine about 3 weeks ago, it was like it needed final approval. And then I was told on the phone by the AD about 2 weeks ago that it was happening. It just happened. I had already scheduled going back to campus with the coaching staff today, like last week, before any of us knew that it was going to be announced. Like they didn't even know it was going to be announced today. They just knew it had already been approved. So it just happened to be the timing of me going to campus was the day it was approved, which kind of worked out good because people on campus saw me back and kind of were putting two and two together for sure.
So where are you actually living? I know you're in the Akron area, but where are you?
I'm about 20 minutes north of campus of Akron. Since about 25 minutes south of Cleveland. So I'm literally like right in between. There's the Cuyahoga Valley National Park runs all the way in between, and I'm pretty much like dead smack in the middle of it. So training wise, I'm 3 minutes from the gym and PT clinic I go to every day, and I'm 5 minutes from my favorite trail spot. So my training situation couldn't be any better right now as far as location.
But for the record, you're a Bengals fan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not a Browns. No, I would never. I think I might bet home. Yeah,
I didn't want people to get any wrong thoughts in their minds. So Coach LeBady, he left, I guess, in 2020, but you're still working with him. Looking ahead to COVID threw me off. 2023 is this next year. Yeah, but we got a world championship in Hungary. Then we got an Olympics the year after that. Like you can get right back on the saddle. Like, have you guys sat down? What are your goals for 2023? Are you going to do anything differently? Or you feel like, hey, I did great in 2021, 2022, I had all these other things going on. Like, what's the plan?
Yeah, I think there was obviously that we we don't want to take 2022 and just throw it out the window and say like we have to scrap everything. Like training didn't work, we didn't run well, we didn't run 143, we didn't, make the team. There's a lot of factors that obviously hindered my performances this season. But I think for sure we realized that I have to train slightly differently as far as age-wise and staying healthy-wise. One of the issues I've had is just trying to keep training consistently going. I'd get like a really, really good stint and then I'd kind of level off because of injury, dip back down, and then have to fight back up. And it was kind of one of these things the whole year to get to USAs. This is even with the NICU and the trips and living at the hospital and the newborn and her being sick prior to that, like this is one of the best fall strength like trainings I've had of my career since being at Akron and cross country. The healthiest I've been in the fall, going into winter, going into like Christmas and the beginning of January. I've always seemed to always have some sort of like naggy little thing come off of fall, and I'm as healthy as I've ever been. And so the goal is to kind of just keep that strength side as strong as possible through the beginning of outdoor, and kind of just continue to stay as healthy as possible, and not overdo anything prior to that, and just kind of get a huge block of really consistent training in, and then just kind of let the horses run when it comes to June, July, August, and really just like take the reins off and just go after it when I'm healthy.
And 2017, you tried to double, but I think of you as an 800 runner. Is this, are you thinking solely about the 800?
Yeah, that's the focus. I think there's a lot I still want to achieve in that. I'd love to compete for a world championship medal in the 1500, but I think there's still more I want to achieve in the mile right now, or the 8 right now. So I think the focus is the 8, but I think there'll be more miles on my schedule, I think, to help the 8. I think I need to get back. That's one of the things we talked about. Whether it's actually 50-50 miles, 1500s to 800s competition level, but it needs to be more training based, and that gap needs to be closer when it comes to actual results too, I think, for me to be successful at the 8. That's where I've been the most successful this season. I've run my best miles and my most consistent miles has been where I've been the best in my 8. So they go hand in hand for me. So I think you'll see me run more miles, but I think 100% my focus will be the 800 come July.
Consistency from 2016 to 2021, when you look at it big picture, it's pretty amazing. I don't think anyone in the world's had it. I'm going to double check them. I'm going to pour through the stats after we get off, but it's pretty good. Turning to sort of governance things, Max Siegel's been in the news a lot, and I know you have some opinions on him. Actually, I don't even know what they are. Jonathan Galt was saying, like, because I said, hey, I was trying to get in touch with you and trying to verify an email, and he's like, oh, I was on Twitter DMs with him about Max Siegel. But I have no idea what you said, but let's talk about Max Siegel a little bit.
Yeah, that was frustrating. That is frustrating.
So have you said anything publicly, or I assume you have, otherwise John would have known about it, but
my only tweet was, I think I said something along the lines of, imagine if he gave 30 athletes $10,000 to train with and how that would be such life-changing. And then I said, oh, wait, he'd have to give up flying private a few times a year. And then the article came out where he said that, do you see any gold medalists like complaining? And Jonathan quote tweeted my tweet and said, well, he's not a gold medalist, but he's a bronze medalist. And this seems pretty outspoken about it. So, yeah.
I hope you saw the Michael Johnson tweet though, right?
I don't think so. I don't think I follow Michael Johnson. I think I see Michael Johnson's tweets from a distance on Twitter.
I personally need to be way more involved in Twitter and social media.
Same. Twitter for me is like falling to the wayside. I for sure not as deep in Twitter as what I hear a lot of it through hear a lot of it through my wife. My wife is like deep in track Twitter. Like the other night she put her phone down and she said, I'm not dealing with people tonight on Twitter about track. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, I don't want to talk about it. She's like, put her phone away. I'm not. I'm far from that side of Twitter.
I need to be more on track Twitter, but also like sprinter track Twitter is different. There's like race.
Oh yeah.
Race take or race TV, whatever it is.
In sprint Instagram is like, I'm in sprint Instagram. Like I've been in rooms with like, there's some people who go live in the sprint Instagram, and I've been in there arguing like myself because they think that we're just like middle distance people, are like, they think tactical races are like the lamest thing ever, and they think we can't beat anybody on the world stage as US. Like, oh yeah, they track Instagram lives and track Twitter are like a whole different world than what. It's so funny because like Let's Run would be like, let's run distance, Instagram, Twitter, Sidious, everybody's like way over here on like the 200-meter start, and then the like literally the parking lot of Hayward like would be where sprint social media is in track and field. It's like two completely different sports.
Yeah, it's crazy because I'm like, whoa. I mean, it's.
Oh yeah, you should. If you use Instagram, you should follow a couple of the guys that go live during the random nights, and you'll see them pop up and then just sit in their rooms, and there'll be random Jamaican people come in there, like random people who like aren't even athletes, they're just like fans, but they're just like going hard at people. Like I know Trayvon and like Marvin Bracey and like Fred Curley are kind of involved in it, and they kind of speak their mind sometimes and get going at it. But yeah, that's a world in itself. But
I've been scrolling here the tweet to find Michael Johnson's tweet. But Michael Johnson is my new favorite track guy on Twitter. I just love his opinions about stuff. But he quoted the San Diego Tribune quoted Max saying, you know, since we show me one gold medalist critical of me, and there's just a picture. Michael just posted a picture of an emoji with a guy raising his hand and it says times 12 for the Olympic gold medals. I mean, for the gold medals. So
the two things that stood out to me are the differences in other Olympic similar programs or federations across it, USA Basketball, USA Swimming, etc. That percentage revenue difference. I understand Max's reasoning for bringing people on, and I don't think it's necessarily. It's a lot of people go at Max himself. I think a lot of it's obviously Max accepts the money, but ultimately USATF offered Max the money and signed the contract with Max and agreed to it. So who's really to blame is, I mean, if you agreed to a company to pay you millions and millions of dollars, like, is it really your fault if you're the one who got the contract negotiated? Or is it USATF's fault for, agreeing to that in the first place? And then I think it's just the lack of transparency of it. That's the second thing to me. There's a lot of lack of transparency amongst USATF. There's a lack of transparency amongst funding, how it works, who gets funded, why people get funded, why the amounts are like different, why they get cut. Some grants get put out. I mean, it's weird. It's a very odd thing, USATF and how it works. And I'm sure on the media side you deal with it sometimes. I've had some connections with it this year. Some different smaller person content creators have had trouble with USATF getting credentials because of posts they've made or pieces they've made about them. Even though they weren't going there to do that, they were just going there to shoot athletes and shoot pictures or video. Yeah, it's a very little weird thing. It's very odd.
Yeah, I think the lack of transparency, communications, I think they do a poor job on that front. And like you said, the board, I think, is probably as much as at fault as Max. They gave him the contract. I mean, Max talks about what a great negotiator is, how he's bringing in all this endorsement money. The best contract he probably negotiated was the one he did with the board.
It's his own.
Holy moly.
I mean, look at the World Cup right now and what it is. The dude who is in charge of all that gets paid less than what Max Siegel does to put on the USATF Journey to Gold that runs in Waco, Texas, and at some Grand Prix meet with like
4 people,
2,000 people at it. Yeah, like total across NBC and in person. Like, in the World Cup's the biggest event in the world, and the dude who is in charge of that gets paid less than him. Like, I mean,
yeah, it's crazy.
Just, and you have athletes who every year, prize money, appearance fees, travel funds, opportunities get less and less and less and less and less. I mean, there's meets coming up in indoor that I started. My agents had a communication. He called me and said, "Hey, they don't have any money this year, or their money's half." And it's just like what? Like, these meets were like staple meets on the calendars, and now there's like no money. I mean, in a sport like that where that's struggling, but then he's continually, his is going like this and everybody else is going like this. Shoe contracts are way less. I mean, way, way, way less than they've ever been. I mean, the money is just, not in the sport, except for Max Siegel's case. And that's where, to me, it's like, doesn't all line up.
I mean, I know you can't really talk about this, but maybe when you retire. But that side of things, we don't see just the money being less. But even for you, right? Like, let's say money was the same in the sport. 2016, you're the hot thing out of college, Olympic bronze medalist. I assume you're bringing it in terms for a track athlete. Compared to other pro sports, it's probably pennies. Um, but now, last year you don't make the worlds. You get fourth. You run 145. I don't know. I could see you making. I have no idea. Like 5 times less money than you did in 2016. But like, I mean, now you're a dad. That sort of stuff. Like, do you feel more pressure? Like, do you like, oh my god, I have no, or my contract's good. I'm good for a couple of years. Like, just what's your sort of general framework with all of this?
There was for sure a period in my career where I had to learn to deal with that piece of, I now provide for a family. I now provide for my wife. I now provide for myself. Like, I'm no longer this like college kid living. Because I mean, when I was running in 16, 17, I was still a young little kid who had an apartment in Portland, who had I had bought a house in Akron, but that time it was like nothing. I had like no expenses. I had really no significant other. I mean, I was kind of just, living life as this young 21, 22,
It's
23
easy
year
then,
old.
right?
Yeah, it's so easy because all you're thinking about is competing. All you're thinking about is winning your aces. But now there's 100% exactly what I told you. Like, my indoor schedule is built around, not only because there's no world indoors. So it's built around success for outdoors is one, but then 1A is, how do I capitalize on the money aspect of it? How do I capitalize on my financial ability to make money in indoors? If it's, whether it's the individual meet paying me, whether it's that meets ranked high enough where I'll get a ranking bonus to then be ranked higher at the end of the season because I lost funding because I'm 21 on the IAAF rankings, not 15th, even though I'd probably still, I mean, you're going to probably come out with your end of year rankings in the 800. I'm probably not fourth, maybe. I mean, I think I'd be close to up there still, and I'm still not going to be funded as like a tier athlete, even though it's like, it's weird things like that.
What does that mean? Before the podcast, because you were talking about Max and athletes being funded, and I'm like, wait, Clayton Murphy, he's a star. He gets paid a lot by Nike, but I'm sure that fluctuates year to year. But like, what does that even mean, being a funded athlete? Can you explain that a little bit more?
So it's changed since I came in. So it used to have tier 1, tier 2, and then like a developmental phase. I was a developmental athlete in 16 and 17, and then I moved straight into tier 1. Um, and then different tiers were funded different amounts of a training stipend, of coaching stipends. It's all, USATF has it all posted, but then they transitioned to this like one tier only criteria where everybody's lumped into this one tier. And I got an email about 3 weeks ago that said, because of your world ranking, you're no longer like qualified to be a tiered athlete. So I lose insurance. I lose like a coaching stipend. I lose a base stipend. I lose a medical stipend. There's supposedly some still travel opportunities for grants and different things like that throughout the year. But a lot of those things are now, I have no longer am supported through USATF in that retrospect.
Wait, the insurance thing's crazy. Is Ari working? Does she have a job? Like,
No. So that's my biggest, yeah. So so she owns her own business. So she was on my insurance. So now either I pay a premium on the insurance to have a continuation year of it, and then obviously the goal would be 2024 to be back in tiered athlete. I would hope that I can make up the ground to be back in tiered the following year. But otherwise, I'm shopping for insurance. I have to make a decision by the end of this week. I'm shopping for insurance for that, and that was obviously not something sitting in the NICU you wanted to see come across your email to say you have your insurance. That's no longer something you want to see when you have a 30-day-old kiddo in the NICU. And
without the insurance, you'd be bankrupt. I don't care how much money you made just after this.
Oh, we got the just the birth. We got just the birth, and that was funny to me. Was the birth was like, I think 13 or something, but because I heard this story, because they do so much business with the insurance company, they only billed the insurance like $1,400. But had I taken that out of pocket and not had insurance, I would have paid $12,000 because they don't do a lot of business with me. It's literally what somebody told me in finance at the hospital. And I was like, what? Multi-billion-dollar insurance companies get a break on how much they have to pay out of pocket. But me, Nah,
Oh
you pay
no.
the full
Yeah, if you don't have
price.
insurance, you pay the most.
You pay the full price. You don't get any discount. I'm just
And
like, what? She's like, you could do a payment. We do payment plans. 0% insurance payment plans, no money down. I'm like, what? You're still paying 16,000 or 12,000. Doesn't matter how you divvy it up.
yeah, but then the NICU for 60 days, that's hundreds of thousands.
I haven't got that bill. I only got one. We got one bill for an X-ray ultrasound from him, and it was like $600. And literally, I remember the ultrasound on that day. The lady walked in, scanned his head like this, and then walked out. And it was like $600 some dollars. I can't imagine what everything else is.
Yeah, I think every self-employed person, like that's technically what I am. I'm on my wife's insurance. You know, Obamacare was pretty good in that sense, though. It is easy for some point. If I had to get on insurance, I could get an exchange and get insurance. But otherwise, like, it's very hard. But it's sort of crazy. You have one bad year, boom, you lose your insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, pro sports. I mean, I guess if you get cut from the Dallas Cowboys, you'd probably lose your insurance too. Maybe not. Who knows? But
yeah, but you're making a lot more money to kind of just pick up the tab, and even a full-time athlete like myself who doesn't have a secondary job is not making enough to necessarily think that throwing, $1,500, $1,000, whatever an insurance premium is now to cover a kiddo and that has an at-risk newborn and wife and doesn't necessarily have, I'm not going to go bankrupt over paying for insurance now, but paying $1,500 out of pocket for sure becomes an expense that wasn't something that I had, prior. So it's different for sure.
yeah, it's nuts. And I just want to. I'm looking at these stats in my sheet here. I said this on the regular podcast, but in case somebody's listening to this part, because your interviews can probably be at the end. Back to Max Siegel. USATF revenue and sponsorship revenue essentially in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018 was all bigger than it was in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So it sounds to me they're going the wrong direction.
I don't have to tell you the direction of the sport's going. I don't have to tell you the direction that the inner workings of the sport is going. But according to Max Siegel, that's not the case. So
yeah. But we do have LA
nice.
2028. I mean, that is the opportunity everyone keeps pointing to. But also, a lot of people believed, we'll have Eugene 2021 or 2022. It ended up being it's going to make tracks popular overnight. It's not the case. I want the one thing I discovered was your podcast with Devin Allen. You guys got to bring that back. It was only like a couple episodes. You could give us insight into the NFL as well. Please bring it back.
Yeah, we had fun with that. It was Devin is a dude. That's a podcast. If you want to have a podcast person, Devin would be a great podcast guest because he's one of the most genuine guys on the circuit. He claims that he is the one who connected Ari and I, and claims that we're the reason they were married is because of Devin, even though I don't know if that's necessarily true, but Devin claims that he's the reason that we're together. And he is one of the most genuine, nicest. Funny enough, he actually texted me when Cash was born and said I was a preemie baby. I was in the NICU, and he said he was born at, I think he said 28 weeks maybe, or 27 weeks too. So he said Cash will turn out to be a hurdler just like me. So just texts like that out of the blue, he'd text me and it's like, hey dude, like I made it through there and look at me, it turned out pretty good.
Yeah,
and he is a really good dude.
We had him on the podcast maybe 2 years ago. One of the few sprinters we ever had. I'm not sure why we did. Maybe because he broke 13 seconds. But my brother and I are NICU babies. We're only 6 weeks early. But twins, we had it easy. There's just two of us that we had to get out of there.
Yeah.
But, well, I also think I need to bring your wife on as a guest because, one, she had to actually deliver the baby. And, oh, my God, her pregnancy sounds about 100 times harder than my wife's. I hope my wife's not listening because I'm sure no pregnancy's that easy.
Pregnancy's great. I expected the worst, but I expected the 2 a.m. cravings, but I didn't expect the 2 a.m. like puke in a bucket cravings all the time, which was not fun.
Well, Cash, it sounds like he's a tough kid. Glad he's thriving. Clayton, thank you for coming on, spending the time with us. If you got anything else you want to say, I need one piece of parenting advice, or what's the biggest surprise about being a parent?
I need the parenting advice. I spent 65 days where somebody changed the diaper for me and fed him for a while. So I only have, a week and a half of experience of this, but I never thought, I mean, the love factor is there, but I'm like addicted to my son. Like I'm just addicted to being around him and like holding him and seeing him. And the one piece of advice that I got from somebody last week, and that I will tell anybody newborn parent wise, is just sleep whenever you can. Doesn't matter if it's at 7 p.m. and you're like, you're not going to be able to go to sleep. If you have the opportunity to sleep again at 10 p.m. when he sleeps, you're going to sleep at 10 p.m. when he sleeps. So it doesn't matter what time of day it is. Doesn't matter if it's 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m. Close your eyes when he closes his eyes and enjoy your sleep. That's all I got to say.
Hey, you're pro parent because
Sleep when he sleeps. Sleep whenever you can. There's no point to try to sleep at night.
Someone told me
you're
that.
50-50. You're 50-50 if you're going to sleep at night.
Yeah, they're like sleep when you can and sleep when your kid sleeps. Like,
Yep.
Because that's your chance. Go to sleep.
Yeah.
Do not like anything. Sleep. Nap. Yes, do it. But also, I hope my parents aren't listening to the podcast because I was in the hospital for 6 weeks when I was born, and I was like, "Wait, Mom, you didn't have to feed me and stuff for 6 weeks. It must have been pretty easy." But
yeah, I mean that's how I was in there we were in there, and whenever you're in there, like as he gets stronger and stronger, they let you do more and more as a parent. They want you to do more and more as a parent. So we started changing his diapers and feeding him bottles and really trying to, adjust him and adjust us to parent life. So we had for sure that like introduction there. But there was multiple times where they would be like, "Oh, do you want to change the diaper?" And I'm like, "I've got plenty to do at home. Like, you just go ahead." I'd be like, "You're already standing by the bassinet. You go ahead and change it. I'll do it in a couple weeks for every time." And they're like, "I guess you're right. Never thought about that." Like, or I'd be like, "Oh, I'm paying you to do it. Like, you're gonna do it."
that was the other thing. We were only in the hospital for 2 nights, but so the other advice we got essentially was like, sleep when you can once you get out. But in the hospital, they're like, when they come and ask, should we take the baby at night? Say yes. Like,
yeah,
A
absolutely.
lot of parents will feel guilty. They're like, no.
Oh, we're already
sleep.
like we've had him for, I think this is what, and we've had him for a week and a half, or a week. We got him on Monday of last week, so 8 days today. We're already like lining up at the end of the week when his godmom wants to come watch him overnight, and we're like, "Hey, can you push that up a few days? Like, you can come any night. Like, you want to come Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? We're great. Like 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. He's all yours. Like, we trust you with it." Because at first we were like, "I don't know if we can trust him with somebody." Now we're like, take him. Like, you got him. Like, you want to feed him? Go ahead. You want to come over and hang out with him? Like, go ahead. He's all yours.
Yeah, agreed. Anyone who's had a kid can watch another kid is my take. They know how to feed a bottle, essentially.
Exactly. So. She has 3, so we're like, yeah, he's all yours.
Qualified in my book. So.
Yep.
Anyone volunteering for sure is qualified. Well, thank you, man. Really appreciate it. Give the best to your wife.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
give the best to Cash. Hopefully we'll see him at some meets this year.
That's the goal, hopefully. So probably not indoor. He's probably a little young for indoor, and the indoor environment's probably not the best place for him. But outdoor season, I'm ready for him to be hanging out at Hayward Field in July for sure.
All right. Thanks.
I appreciate it.